So if you've been on this channel a while now, you would know that I usually have a pretty positive outlook on the media I choose to cover, whether it be indie horror games, old creepypastas from my childhood, or weird, obscure B-movies. I've always chosen to approach things with a side of positivity because, well, this is a channel that was made for the express purpose of me sharing my love for the media I consume. I very rarely ever want to cover negative topics because that is very rarely where I find my passions lie. All of that to say though, that recently I've found myself reflecting on old content I've made because I've noticed that in my 4 years now of creating content, I feel I've grown and changed a lot as a person. I noticed this specifically whenever the newest FNAF game, Secret of the Mimic, launched last month. That game was good, great even, but I found that when it came out I just didn't really care all that much for it, which felt odd because if the game had come out 2 or even 3 years prior, it would have probably been something I adored, and yet here I am now feeling incredibly indifferent to it. And I feel like that's mainly because since this channel started, my tastes and opinions have changed very drastically over time. When I made my first video, I was freshly 18 years old, barely even an adult, and as my content has changed, so have I. A lot of old content I made reflected a much different point in my life, and I find it interesting to look back on them for that reason, because I feel like they no longer represent the thoughts and opinions I have now. Not to say that I dislike these videos, in fact I still kind of love them. One thing I'll forever pride myself on as a creator is that every single video I make comes from the heart. I may not get every fact right about the subject matter, my opinions on it may change in the time after it's uploaded, but when I sit down to make a video, the contents of the video have my true, honest feelings towards the subject painted all over them. So when I watch stuff like my original Bendy and the Ink Machine video, I can't ever say I hate it because I'm just brought back to the point in time when I made it, when I so excitedly worked my ass off to try and express the undying love I had for an indie horror game many people at the time had either forgotten about or brushed aside. That video was so important to me. In many ways, it made my career with me still being known on the internet, mainly for my adoration of the Bendy franchise. But with the importance of that video stated, I also feel the need to go back to my original point that in the time since it came out, I feel like it's become incredibly outdated, like many other uploads I've made around a similar time frame. My opinions have changed, I've become more critical, I've had much more exposure to other pieces of media across many mediums, and I feel like in order to express that, I actually wanted to revisit the original Bendy to give my current, honest thoughts on the game. I don't intend to be overly negative or to ever bash my younger self's opinions, but rather simply offer an up-to-date, constructive, and honest take on the game that really solidified my YouTube career. I intend to go through every chapter similarly to my original video, not going into nearly as much detail as that original upload, but rather giving my thoughts about each part of the game and what I think about the things they attempt to achieve. But before that, I wanted to show y'all this weird tape I found that I think was left by Joey Drew himself. Said something about it being useful for people who might need to practice internet safety.
Hello everyone, it's me, Joey Drew. Now, I don't know much about this internet thing. I don't even really know what it is. Has that been invented yet? Probably not. But as a leader, I always prioritize company safety, and that includes privacy and security for all my employees. Which is why today's partner for that Spec fella is just something that people need.
Oh my goodness, it's a tape talking about this video's partner, NordVPN. By using NordVPN, your internet connection will be encrypted, and you'll be provided with a different IP address and virtual location, which will keep your data safe. It also says here on the back of the tape that NordVPN is also able to protect you through Threat Protection Pro, which will check all files you download for viruses or malware, will block any and all harmful sites, and will even block intrusive ads. It also offers a dark web monitor, a service designed to alert you if any sites have your information, so you never become a victim of hackers. If you go to nordvpn.com/Pastra right now, you'll receive an exclusive deal plus 4 extra months. That is a deal you do not not want to miss out on. And if you end up purchasing the service and find yourself unsatisfied, don't worry, because Nord also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you so much to NordVPN for partnering with me for this video, and remember the link to my special deal is nordvpn.com/Pastra. Don't miss out. All right, though, let's get into Bendy now. Oh, Bendy Chapter 1, such a fun starting point to what this game will ultimately be. I feel like Bendy Chapter 1 is often panned by a lot of people who play the game for the fact that not much happens in it. The chapter is a mere collectathon, with you playing as Henry and making your way through an abandoned Joey Drew Studios to try and activate the mysterious ink machine. While I do believe that this chapter is slow and lacks a lot of action or plot, I still feel that this is kind of a perfect introduction to everything you need to know about this game. It introduces the world and mystery of Bendy and the Ink Machine in a safe environment where you're able to properly take everything in. The overarching objective of activating the Ink Machine to find out what it does builds a level of intrigue, making the player wonder just what will happen once the objective is complete and the machine is given life. All of this happens with the occasional small scares implying something is perhaps in there with you, following your every step and monitoring your progress. Cutouts move on their own, projectors activate without any operators, the body of a once living, real cartoon character can be found strapped to a table. You can't help but get an eerie feeling from the whole chapter, even if there isn't much overt danger that shows itself, and that's something I always really admired about it. If I were to give it a couple critiques though, because it certainly isn't perfect, I think a couple flaws in this chapter have to do mainly with the environmental design and the payoff to all the buildup at the end. The art style of Bendy and the Ink Machine is absolutely excellent. It's what pulled myself and most other people who tried it into the game in the first place. But one major issue I find this game has at times, which is very prevalent in this chapter, is that sometimes the environments feel incredibly samey. Rooms look very similar to each other, making it very easy at times to get lost on a first playthrough, and when the entire first chapter's content is exploring and looking for items, it can be a little annoying revisiting the same rooms over and over while trying to find your way around. I think my other issue with this chapter is the actual reveal of Bendy himself. I once praised this reveal as being a very shocking moment in the chapter, with the Ink Demon revealing himself with a very intense jump scare which leads right into a fast-paced chase where the entire building is collapsing around you. One big thing I never mentioned in my original video though is that this isn't actually a chase and there is no danger. After the initial Bendy jump scare happens and the crazy intense music starts, nothing happens. Bendy does not chase you, and there are no consequences for taking a leisurely stroll through the rest of the building as you make your way to the end. This moment is the illusion of a chase, and once you realize that, I think any and all mystique it has quickly fades away, which greatly drags down the chapter because the entire point of this moment is that's the payoff to the very slow, gradual buildup of tension this chapter is supposed to evoke. So yeah, Chapter 1 isn't without its flaws, but honestly, I still really like it. It got me incredibly invested in what this game was trying to do, and even on revisit, it just felt good to be here playing it again. Let's see how Chapter 2 stacks up in comparison. So Chapter 2 is interesting. This chapter made a point of trying to expand upon everything Chapter 1 had going for it. It gives us new mechanics, new characters, a new location, and this time there is an actual proper threat here. I think this large expansion of what Bendy is as a game is both everything great and everything wrong with Chapter 2. The setting and the villain of this chapter, Sammy Lawrence, are used very well. The environmental puzzles we see throughout take really good advantage of things we interacted with in the previous chapter, like the tapes which offer us little hints and clues on how to use the items around us. Sammy himself also feels like a very ominous threat as we catch glimpses of him throughout the chapter. He's always seen lurking around, never being seen long enough for us to properly interact with him, and that coupled with the strange satanic imagery everywhere makes it feel like we've wandered into his domain and we have to escape before he decides to act on whatever he plans to do to us. As well as improved puzzles, environmental design, and antagonists though, Bendy Chapter 2 also introduces another core aspect of the game, being combat. We get our hands on an axe, and with it we're able to face the game's first set of enemies called Searchers. And I'm gonna keep it completely a stack here. The combat in this game is bad, like really bad. The way melee combat works in this is so incredibly bare bones. You very weakly swing whatever weapon you have to the best of your ability while trying to avoid getting hit yourself, but with how incredibly slow and sluggish Henry is, it kind of just boils down to you and the enemy slapping each other until one of you decides to die. It feels so strange to me because, like, normally when a game has melee combat this clunky and terrible feeling, it's usually because melee combat is supposed to be a last resort. Like in a survival horror series such as Resident Evil, for example. In those games, melee combat 9 times out of 10 is just as shitty, but at least the reason there is that you have other means to defend yourself and the melee combat is reserved for when you've exhausted your other resources. Here, there is no alternative. You have to fight with the horrible weapons you're given, and it sucks. It isn't scary, it isn't rewarding, it isn't fun, it's just bad. All that aside though, once we do wrap things up this chapter, killing most of the enemies and solving the puzzles before us, we're captured by Sammy Lawrence, who attempts to sacrifice us to the Ink Demon only to be killed by it himself. It's here where we get a chase with the Ink Demon, and unlike the previous chapter, this one is actually a real chase. Which I find very interesting because I feel like the release of this chapter was the first time we ever got to see the now incredibly common mascot horror chase. You know, long twisting hallway with multiple wrong paths, all the while the mascot of the game is hunting you down. While I feel like Poppy Playtime was the game that really popularized this trope in the genre, unless I'm wrong in forgetting something, Bendy Chapter 2 was the first to properly do it out of mainstream mascot horror games. And in terms of quality, it's alright. Like, it's nothing crazy. Bendy chases you down a hallway with some cool visual effects on the walls signifying how close he's getting to you. Then you kind of just go through a door and it's over. It's nothing really crazy, it's just a cool little moment to end off the chapter. Chapter 2 overall to me is a mixed bag. I appreciate it for trying to build on the world of the game and for the improvements it brought to the table. However, I also feel like it was the beginning of the core issues this game has as a full package. Let's see how Chapter 3 changes things.
Come out and show yourself. Boris?
Chapter 3. Oh boy, Chapter 3. This chapter somehow manages to be one of my favorite parts of the entire game and one of my least favorites at the exact same time. If I were to describe Chapter 3 in a nutshell, it is a chapter that is full of fantastic ideas with no good way to bridge them together. This chapter has some of the coolest concepts, the best written characters, some of the coolest set pieces and enemy designs, and yet despite all of that, it feels really bad to play because the actual content is next to nothing. This chapter has you quite literally doing chores. You are sent from one floor to the next collecting items that you are told to retrieve arbitrarily while waiting for something different to happen that never does. The shitty combat is back in full swing, this time with weapons significantly weaker than before and enemies that are much stronger to go with it, so it feels even worse this time around, and the actual fetch quests themselves have very little variety, with them essentially all boiling down to go to this area, check thing, collect item, rinse and repeat. I liked the collection aspect of chapter 1 because it felt like it served a purpose. In that chapter, we were working towards a tangible goal, but here it feels completely and totally pointless, so it is a slog to get through. Now, with that said, you're probably wondering what I do like about this chapter, and despite how harsh my criticism may be for the aspects I don't like, there is a lot I actually do. First off, the utilization of the Ink Demon. In previous chapters, Bendy felt like a very strong looming presence that didn't actually appear much. He would jump scare you here and there, show up at the end for one chase, if even, but that was about it. Here he is a real, constant threat, with his mechanic that allows him to show up in places you spend too much time in looking for you. Yeah, sometimes he just doesn't show up, and sometimes he takes way too long to leave, but the mechanic itself is solid and makes him feel like you're always at risk of encountering him. Another aspect of this chapter I really like is its final encounter, a monster called the Projectionist. I always thought from an artistic standpoint that this guy was the coolest monster in the game, a projector-headed monster that you avoid in a maze of projectors. From a game design standpoint, I love this. Wading through the maze of ink with all the projectors around you makes for some really cool tension, with it not being immediately apparent at first glance if the light you're seeing is coming from one of the props in the environment or the monster itself. It's also pretty cool to me how if you do the secret route to get the Tommy gun temporarily, or if you just are really dedicated to melee combat, you can just straight up kill him and go through the maze without a threat. It's a really neat section in an otherwise boring chapter. And of course, no discussion of things I like about Bendy is complete without me mentioning her. Okay, so being completely real, when writing this video, I did not know how to approach discussing Alice Angel, because if you know anything about me, you know the reputation I have surrounding her. What I am going to choose to do here is to discuss the actual writing reasons why I like her so much, because I really do believe she is the most interesting character in the entire game. Alice to me stands out because she represents everything wrong with Joey Drew Studios and the treatment of its staff in a single character. A woman so in love with the character she played that it became an obsession so all-consuming that when she was replaced, it practically ruined her life. She was so broken by it, so desperate to get the chance to be that character again, she actively allowed herself to become the monster she is in Chapter 3. She is a psychotic character so consumed by her obsession to embody the character she centered her life around that she's willing to torture and maim anyone who she thinks will have the pieces she needs to make herself beautiful, and I think there is something so morbidly tragic about it. Even when she quite literally takes the physical form of the character she loves, she comes out flawed and cannot handle it. She is a wonderfully twisted villain, and in my opinion, the character with the most depth in the original Ink Machine game, and I love her for it. What, did you think I was gonna call her hot again? No, you already know that I think she's hot. Get new material, get out of here! So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot to love in this chapter for me and a lot that drags it down. Because of this, it's so hard to really form a full, honest opinion of it other than simply describing it as a love-hate relationship. Let's see if chapter 4 will be any better. Chapter 4 is probably the best in the entire game, I'm gonna be so real. When I was replaying Bendy for this video, I found that Chapter 4 was the one I had the least issues with on revisit. It's just a solid experience that doesn't really do too much wrong in my eyes. This chapter has us hunting for Alice after she kidnaps our friend from the previous chapter, Boris, and it sees us exploring a very different set piece in the form of an abandoned amusement park. Right off the bat, the setting of this chapter is great. This one feels feels like it tries really hard to give us something fresh, and it takes good advantage of it. The goofy little minigames needed to access different parts of the locations are silly and fun, boss fights like Bertram Piedmont are super memorable, and this time around, since we have a proper objective, our time spent here feels like it actually means something. This chapter also improves on the game a lot by making combat much less of a focus, instead making stealth a bigger highlight this time. There is still the occasional fight like the aforementioned Bertram fight or the final boss, but with those ones I don't even mind because they're in a very controlled environment where the clunky, slow movement isn't very detrimental. One thing that was removed from the previous chapter I am a bit sad about though is the exclusion of the Ink Demon's roaming mechanic. You'd think with the way chapter 3 set it up that it would become like the Ink Demon's main thing after it was introduced, but no, it was a chapter 3 exclusive mechanic. In fact, Bendy only appears a single time in this entire chapter, and it's for a cutscene where he kills the projectionist and then he just kind of strolls off. It's a bit underwhelming for the main antagonist of the game, I'm not gonna lie. As for other things done in this chapter, I actually find the ending to be a bit odd. See, we eventually arrive where Boris has been taken, only to find that Alice has already dissected him and taken the parts from him that she wanted, and then we fight him. The boss fight itself is probably the best in the original Ink Machine game. We're basically avoiding Boris's attacks until he tires out, and we use the ink from his wound to build weapons to kill him. It's cool. I like it. The part about this ending that throws me off, though, is that despite the fact that Alice's plan seemingly succeeded, nothing really comes from that. Right after we kill Boris, she just kind of angrily runs at us before getting killed by Allison, who is introduced right here, and like, what was the point of that then? If Alice's whole plan was to use Boris's parts to perfect her form, why is she still the same when we see her? What purpose did any of that have if she was just going to be killed off randomly anyways? It really felt here like they did not know how to end this chapter, so this ending was just thrown together to tease chapter 5, and I think it's pretty underwhelming for that. Overall though, like I said, I like this chapter. Aside from the smaller critiques I have towards it, I think this is the most solid overall package. The story keeps you invested, the environments are cool, the innovation of the gameplay and combat is really appreciated. It's pretty damn good. Let's see if chapter 5 holds up. Chapter 5 does not hold up at all. Okay. I know I said I wasn't gonna be bashing my old opinions in this video. I know I said that, but being totally honest with you guys, I do not know how I enjoyed this chapter 3 years ago. Chapter 5 is easily the worst in the entire game, and it isn't even close. This entire thing feels so incredibly thrown together and sloppily done that I swear the only thing they actually had planned for it was the ending itself, which we will get to. Chapter 5 opens with this long, unskippable cutscene that establishes two things: the characters of Tom and Allison, our new companions for this chapter, and the Seeing tool, an item that allows us to see hidden messages throughout the chapter. After this cutscene ends and we actually start to play the game, this is where the issues start. Chapter 5 looks at all the improvements that Chapter 4 did for the game and instead chooses to act like they never happened. You go on this slow boat ride across an ink river that boils down to holding down M1 and occasionally stopping to hit ink off the boat before an ink hand comes to kill you, and right after you arrive at probably the worst section of gameplay in the entire game. This town where you have to just stand in the center like it's an arena and do nothing but fight enemies. First, Sammy Lawrence, who is just back for no real reason, and then waves upon waves upon waves of enemies. Having the combat be the main and primary focus of the final chapter is the worst possible decision that could have been made here. It feels incredibly arbitrarily thrown in to inflate the playtime, and this section especially sucks when you're trying to get all the achievements, because failing something like the complete without dying achievement means if you die a single time you have to restart the chapter, sit through the long unskippable cutscene again, and then you can try again. Sammy's boss fight is a mess too. I was praising Chapter 4 for innovating a lot on its combat with having bosses that actually take advantage of how the game feels to play, but this one does not follow any of that design philosophy at all. He's just a basic enemy that attacks a lot, so the fight is just a poorly put together DPS check with some pretty generous checkpoints. After all that is said and done, and we do a long, drawn-out stealth sequence, we arrive at the final boss, which, being honest, I actually still kind of like it. Like, yeah, Beast Bendy looks goofy, and yeah, the fight itself is just hugging the side of a wall as he runs around aimlessly, but I don't know, there's something about this boss fight that stops me from outright hating it. I don't know, maybe the rest of the chapter being so abysmal to play made me enjoy this part by comparison. One thing I will say though, since we're at the end of the chapter and it hasn't come up, I find it very funny how the seeing tool is treated at the start like the most important thing this chapter, and yet it kinda ends up being useless. This final boss is the only time it comes in handy, and even then you don't need it, because all it does is point you in the direction of levers that are pretty easy to find on your own anyways. I find that so strange because, like, the beginning of this chapter makes it seem like a core item you will need to progress, and yet none of the chapter is in any way designed around it. So it, just like everything else this chapter, just feels completely arbitrarily thrown in without any rhyme or reason. Which kind of leads me to perhaps the single most controversial part of this chapter and Bendy as a whole, the ending. The ending where we see Henry enter Joey's apartment, which does not share the same art style as the rest of the game, and he's sent back to the very beginning of Chapter 1 after a conversation with his old friend. The game is revealed to be an infinite loop. This ending was very unsatisfying to a lot of players, and I can't say I blame them very much. It comes completely out of left field, with next to no proper resolution to anything shown prior, but with that said, I really liked it before, and I really like it now. When I first got this ending, it fascinated me. It made me realize the entire game I played was not simply a studio that got weirdly bigger and bigger as we went, but rather an entire other reality unlike our own. This ending put the entire game into a new, compelling perspective to me that made me want to know more, and I feel like that was exactly the intention. Sure, it isn't the most satisfying thing in the world, but I really liked it even before it was further elaborated on with the Dark Revival. It is the one part of Chapter 5 I will still defend tooth and nail. I think it is cool and I love it. But yeah, that is all of the chapters in Bendy. Re-experiencing this game in a new lens was interesting, because while I feel like I was certainly more critical of it than I was 3 years ago, I still couldn't help but love the game. For every moment I complained about or critiqued, there was always this feeling of, yeah, but I love it anyways. And I think that really reinforces a philosophy I first brought up in another video I feel is quite outdated, my video about FNAF Security Breach and why I really liked that game. The philosophy I brought up in that video was the idea that it's okay to love a piece of media that's flawed if the flaws don't detract from why you enjoyed in the first place, which is something I certainly hold on to, especially when revisiting Bendy. Sometimes there's just a work of art that you can see the flaws in, and those flaws either don't matter to you, or may even add to the experience. With that video mentioned though, and the philosophy I preached from it coming up, I do feel like I should mention that I don't necessarily think it entirely holds up. See, when I made that video, some viewers were quick to point out that there was a bit of a flaw in what I was saying. The way I presented the information there, though it was not my intention, could very easily be misconstrued as me saying that fans of something should not have standards for the media they consume, that it's okay to just accept whatever you're given if the flaws don't personally annoy you, which I acknowledge is a scary thing to go and say because, well, that encourages creators to try less because they know fans will consume the content they create regardless of quality. If I were to make an addendum to that statement, a more modern version of what I believe would be, it's okay to enjoy flawed media, but it's also good to be critical of media you love. Bendy and the Ink Machine is a game that I still, to this day, adore. It means a lot to me. I love its story and characters. I love the visuals and artwork. I just like playing it. But I'm also able to be critical of it and point out its flaws because I love it. Because I see so much in it and want to see it improve and be the best thing it can be. And you know what's crazy? This has happened. Bendy and the Dark Revival was what really made me understand how flawed the original Bendy was, because that game made a conscious effort to improve on almost every piece of criticism that was given to it. Dark Revival looks better, it feels better to play, the story is coherent, it is just a genuinely good game. And I think the reason it was able to exist was because people were critical of that original Bendy, and I think that change in perspective for me was the real reason I wanted to make this video. Yeah, I was harder on it throughout this than I was in my original Bendy video, but despite everything, despite the fact that I have grown a lot as a person and as a creator, despite the fact that I look at the original Bendy and see all the flaws I was blind to in my original video, I still love the game, man. It's not my favorite game ever made, not even my favorite horror game anymore, but I still sure as hell love it, and I think that's awesome. To those of you who have been around long enough to have seen that video and to now see this, thank you for sticking around to see where this channel's gotten. Seeing where I am now compared to 3 years ago is honestly mind-boggling, and who knows, maybe in the future my opinions will continue to change and I'll make another one of these videos to see how much I've grown since now. Until then, I'm just gonna keep doing what I do. Thank you very much for watching this video. It was genuinely so much fun to make. I hope to see you here for whatever my next project ends up being. Goodbye for now.